Hey, welcome to another episode of Chasing Rings. Big dude, G, what's up, fellas?
Hey,
Hey, what's going on?
What's up? What's up? What's up? Another busy day in sports. I feel like there's a lot of transactions starting to take place, even though they can't officially be approved until the first league day, which is March 11th. But a lot of things coming hot off the presses. Before we get into our show today, you know what we have to do? We got to get into that. Wait, what? Right?
yeah,
So, did you all know that the first player picked in the first NFL draft in 1936, Jay Berwanger, never played in the NFL?
Wait, what?
crazy.
Yes, never played in the NFL. He actually was also the first Heisman Trophy winner. Back then, it was called the Downtown Athletic Club Trophy. In the year after he won it, it got changed to Heisman. When John Heisman died, they named it after him. He was the director of the athletic club, but he also won the first Heisman Trophy. So, what happened with him, and you'll love this big dude, the Philadelphia Eagles drafted him in 1936 with that first pick in the first ever draft. However, they did not think they could pay him the $1,000 that he demanded at the time. So they
Crazy.
traded rights to Chicago. And he did not want to give up his amateur status because he wanted to go participate in the decathlon in the 1936 Olympics. So he went and pursued that, didn't make the Olympic team. Then he tried to come back to go to the Bears. And at that time, George Hallis was not willing to pay. At that time, he wanted 15,000. But George Hallis was only willing to go 12.5. So he never ended up playing football. He ended up working for a rubber company in Chicago and playing some rugby on the side. And I think he was like a part-time coach at the University of Chicago. So that's Jay
Wow.
Burrow, first ever Heisman Trophy winner, first pick in the draft, and never played a down in the NFL.
Now that's interesting.
Crazy,
Big
right?
time. That's real heavy.
Big dude, what do you have for us today?
Um, the last pick of the draft, as many people know, the person as the last pick is called Mr. Irrelevant. And that's going on since 1976, almost 50 years. It's the final pick of the draft. But did you know that only 14 of those selections have played in a regular season game in the NFL?
Wait, what? Wait, what?
Yep.
How many
14.
do you know how many people have been? I mean, sure, how many drafts? I guess if we had almost what year is this of the NFL?
Well, the
The
one you mentioned, I think, was 36. So
Yeah,
I don't
so
know if you
yeah,
count that one. We had plenty of those, but then some people try to say that the modern one was 51. I think that's when they started doing the Wonderlic test and all that. They started developing it, and it became something else. So I would say, gosh, 65 with 65 and 26 if we include the first 64 and 26 if we include the first 90 maybe.
that's a lot of athletes to be picked and never play. That's
Yeah, and that
crazy.
and right, and that since 76 would make it 49 years, but still, every year the amount of drafts and all those things went up. But my brother got drafted in the 17th round in 1972, and then yeah, that was when there were 17 rounds, and he said he got called from the road. There was no celebration, just be on the plane and be there in 18 hours, kind of thing. So
Wow.
different. $14,500 contract.
Yeah, that money was crazy back then. Gee, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so I kind of went down the rabbit hole looking at, since we're going to cover Philly and Washington today, and asking myself who are some like big name players that went in the later rounds, like five, six, or seven. And some people may know this. I didn't know it. It's a wait what for me. But Dexter Manley, I was surprised went 119 in the fifth round.
Wait,
And then
what?
I was also surprised, as much as I know about Harold Carmichael, I didn't know he went in the seventh.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I didn't know that for either of those guys, especially as good as they ended up being. You would think that they would have been drafted way higher than that. But let me
Yeah, I
ask you
want to
guys a
say, let me see,
question.
Harold Carmichael went to an HBCU, right?
I
Yeah,
believe
Southern.
so.
He went to Southern.
Southern, right, right. So then, so that I understood that, especially back in the early '70s. So this is like
Hmm.
'71, something like that. But Dexter Manley, that surprised me. Just I was like really, really surprised, and I'm looking, trying to figure out, what could have been the reason. And honestly, I couldn't find anything legitimate. So maybe you all
Hmm.
know something about Dexter.
Nah,
But hey,
nah.
well, what I can, hey, and I'm not trying to be funny saying this, but that Wonderlic test they used to, and they used to use that, and he didn't do well in school, and he had a lot of other issues that you might remember.
Okay.
Um, that he came out and had some issues with reading and all those things, and finally admitted it to Roy Firestone on one of
Ah.
his shows. Yeah, so there was a lot of other things going on. That I think he went to Oklahoma State, I believe, and he had a lot of issues, personal issues, and other issues that
Coming out of college.
coming out of college. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, but going back to the draft though, did they know that? Because that not being able to read stuff didn't come out until, if I
right.
remember correctly, either the end of his career or after his career.
Yeah, pretty
So,
near the end. Pretty near the end.
interesting.
Yeah, man. I'm like, he may not have been able to read, but he can definitely read plays.
Yeah, I know people that played against him. Man, he's incredible.
And you know what's
Okay.
crazy? What came to my mind, G, with you bringing up, especially Dexter Manley, we'd probably be old enough to more remember that draft period than Harold Carmichael. But I don't really remember the draft back in the day. Like I'm trying to think, what's the first draft that I can remember? And I know TV was certainly different. It probably wasn't on like that. But I don't
Mm-mm,
really remember drafts back in the day.
no.
For me, it would have been late high school, so maybe 11th or 12th grade. So for
Hmm.
me, thinking around 80, 85 or 86, sometime around there is when I actually started paying attention, at least somewhat.
Which probably would have made sense because you figure what ESPN came like what late 70s,
Yeah.
so they probably were really cooking by the time we got in high school around that
Hmm.
time period, mid to late 80s. They probably really started cooking, and their broadcast probably improved and started showing different things. So that's probably about right for all of us. You have any recollections, big dude?
I'm going to say right around 1981. I remember, or right around the class. It used to all be in a hotel. I remember they used to do shots at a hotel, and that's when my
Hmm.
brother Ron brought it to my attention. I said, "Well, where did they do the draft at?" And I said, "Didn't they have draft parties?" He said, "Man, look, you were in a hotel. It was like being at a business meeting, and everybody
Hmm.
didn't come there. They were mostly just the teams, and they all had to be there and accounted for, so nobody tried any foolishness. So
Hmm.
they all had to be there. They were all, suited down, and they all had papers and passed things around, but and made phone calls, and that was it. But the one I remember, I said 81. The one that Elway was in, I kind of remember. I paid more attention to Chris Berman and other people taking a mic and saying Elway in that 83 class. I think it was Marino too. I'm not sure. I think
Hmm.
so. Yeah,
It was that class. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that
So,
might be mine too.
yeah, that's what I remember most. And I think I was about 17 when I was out, almost 17.
Okay, okay. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll come up with some other great draft stuff with a few weeks left several weeks left before we get to the draft, and always uncovering some weird, odd things that, as much as we know about sports in general, but especially football, a lot of things that none of us know. So this is pretty cool. All right, so that was wait what. Um, in sports news today, a few things that are hot on the wire. Can't escape college football, can we, fellas? Brendan Sorsby, the new Texas Tech quarterback who transferred from Cincinnati, is being sued by Cincinnati for breaching his NIL contract, which, according to them, he was supposed to pay them $1 million if he transferred. So they had a $1 million exit fee built into his NIL contract if he was to transfer. Mr. Sorsby has refused to pay that $1 million. So Cincinnati now joins the list of schools, Georgia and Duke, who have now sued athletes for liquidation damages after they've reached their NIL deals. Georgia was 2024 with Damon Wilson, who was an edge rusher who ended up transferring to Missouri. That case is still pending. And then we have the Duke case is Darian Mensah, the quarterback who's still in college now, who just transferred to Miami. So this college football is becoming a three-ring circus every day. I feel like there's something new. There's another lawsuit. And at some point, the NCAA is going to have to do something and get involved in this. You guys have any thoughts on that one before I continue with the news?
It's just a shame that players are involved, and I guess they're trying to even it up. This is where I think the NCAA cannot even get involved when you start talking about players paying exit fees. Everything is superseding, and in everything, every culture, it's like culture on top of culture, practice on top of practice, especially business practice, is all on top of regulation. Regulation, certainly, and I know, G, that's your specialty. Regulation, in my mind, in college football has taken a significant backseat.
Yeah, my position is, it's all contract based, and from my view is I don't care who's in that contract. If you are violating it, then you need to be held to account. If you're allowing coaches to buy out and things of that nature, you gotta allow the student athletes to do it. So I just look at consistency.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes because it's definitely getting out of control. In a more positive story, CC Sabathia, former Major League pitcher, will become the 24th player in New York Yankees history to have his number retired when the Yankees play the Orioles on September 26th. So we'll have to try to get to the stadium for that. He played for the Yankees for 10 years, 2009 to 2019. After he played 7 years in Cleveland and one in Milwaukee, who drafted him. During his stint with the Yankees, he was 134-88 with an ERA of 3.81 and 1,700 strikeouts. In 2009, when the Yankees won the World Series, he was the ALCS MVP and helped them win the World Series, obviously, even though another odd stat to think about, he never won a game in the World Series. But he pitched pretty well. Yankees just didn't win those games in a hard-fought series with the Phillies, I will say. He was also a three-time All-Star with the Yankees. For his career, he was 251 and 161 with the 3.7 ERA. And I love this. I did not know this. He's third all-time among left-handers in strikeouts behind legends Randy Johnson and Steve Carlton. So I did not know that. I didn't know his career was that story. So congratulations to CC Sabathia. Like I said, I might have to get up to the Bronx for that one. Going into its 30th season, the WNBA reports that it has turned a profit for the first time, which I love that. So it's basically going to give $8 million back to each team to disperse among its players. The union also will be giving back $9.25 million to disperse to the teams to distribute to its players. That $9.25 million is coming from licensing revenues, and they're really focused on the years 2020 to 2025. So any player who was on a roster during that time period, certainly, any current players, they will all receive the benefit of that. Now, I know that when you start doing the math, that pales in comparison to what the fellas are getting, but it's a step in the right direction, especially since they're in the process of negotiating their new collective bargaining agreement. I hope that this just starts to build momentum for some serious contracts. And I know when we were talking the other day about, watching college basketball and NBA, I have made the statement that I tend to watch more women's college basketball. So I probably know more women in the WNBA than I know guys in the NBA these days. But finally, in the NFL, the New York Jets have traded pass rusher Jermaine Johnson to the Tennessee Titans in exchange for defensive tackle Tivandre Sweat. The Jets selected Johnson in the first round in 2022, while Sweat was selected in the second round by Tennessee in 2024. This is one of the latest moves that the Jets have made in getting rid of some of their first-round picks. They just traded Sauce Gardner to Indy and Quinnen Williams to Dallas. So it sounds like the Jets are kind of cleaning house and probably going to be starting from scratch here. They do have the second pick and a few other picks, so not a bad idea for them. This move is going to reunite Johnson with Robert Saleh in Tennessee, who actually coached him in New York when they drafted him. So I'm guessing that Johnson probably fits into the scheme that Saleh wants to run in Tennessee. But just a side note on that, we mentioned earlier, the league does not officially start its business until March 11th. This trade will not go into effect officially until that first day of the league season on March 11th. And we had another breaking story that I was talking about before we actually went on. Anthony Richardson, the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, has requested a trade. It looks like the Colts will certainly be signing Daniel Jones to a longer-term contract. Hopefully he's recovering from his Achilles efficiently, but Anthony Richardson looking to find another team possibly. So that will be interesting. So that's it in news. Today, we will continue our draft analysis and continue with the NFC East. We'll finish that up today. We have Philly and Washington remaining. And, I know Big Dude's going to go in on this one. So G and I are going to kick it into gear first and then open that floor up for Big Dude, since those are his boys. So the Eagles, let's get into the Eagles. Their season was tumultuous, to say the least, all over the place. But oddly enough for the Eagles, they were 4-0 through the first 4 weeks. And they were 8-2 through 10 weeks, even though they were going through all this turmoil. But I think a lot of the issues that they had really reared its head towards the end of the season. You would watch the Eagles from week to week, and they didn't really look impressive, but they found a way to win. They always found a way to win, and that's what champions do, right? They came in as the defending champions, but there was always this drama behind the scenes. And to this day, none of us on the outside really know what the drama was. But, in terms of how it played out in the media, it really was more so based on the offense, and it seemed to center around A.J. Brown. And when I'm throwing A.J. Brown's name out there, I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, because none of us know the details and who's right, who's wrong in this situation. But the offense pretty much stalled out as the Eagles season came to an end. The defense played lights out. The defense was 13th in total defense, 15th in interceptions, 11th in fumble recoveries, and they allowed the fifth fewest points. Now, I think that stat really sticks out for the Eagles, because we all know how good their defense was in the Super Bowl year, and it didn't seem as if they were as good because their games were tighter. They obviously had some key losses. Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Slay, Bradbury, Kenneth Gainwell, Mekhi Becton, who ironically was just released by the Chargers. So I don't know, maybe the Eagles will look to get him back. But they had a lot of losses. And I threw Mekhi Becton in on defense. He's not a defender. But or is Kenneth Gainwell. But they lost a lot of people on defense. And being out on the field so long, I think really cost the Eagles in the end, because the offense was 3 and out a lot, and the defense just spent way too many minutes out there. Nonetheless, the Eagles won the NFC East championship again, but controversially ended up as a 3rd seed instead of a 2 seed when Nick Sirianni decided not to play his starters in Week 18 and ended up relinquishing that 2nd seed to the Bears. And a lot of people think that may have cost the Eagles as they lost in the wild card round against the 49ers at home. Shortly afterwards, Patullo was fired, relieved of his responsibilities as offensive coordinator, to the delight, I know, of many Eagles fans. In terms of the offseason, the Eagles really need to address the A.J. Brown saga, but really the pressure is probably truly on Nick Sirianni, Hurts, and certainly new offensive coordinator Sean Mannion. So as the Eagles look towards the draft, they have 20 free agents, but they only have $2.65 million in cap space, which is 20th in the league. So not a lot of money to work with there. And some of their key free agents are Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra, who are both tight ends. So they're going to have to make a decision there on their tight ends. There are some decent tight ends in the draft, but it looks like they're probably going to re-sign Goddard. They have some rookie contracts that will be up after this year. We'll have to probably make some decisions there. They might not be able to keep all of their DBs in that talented DB core. Reed Blankenship is a key free agent there. because I think he's probably the veteran in that group of DBs at safety. Jalen Phillips, the edge that they brought on this year, and Nakobe Dean, the linebacker, doesn't look like they're going to re-sign Nakobe Dean, so we'll see what happens there. But those are some of the key names that want to take a look at on defense. They have 1 first-round pick, and like the rest of the NFC East, they're playing a really tough schedule. So I think they have 8 playoff teams from last year. And so the Eagles are going to have a hell of a road for them to get back to where they were the previous year when they won the Super Bowl. So I'll start with you, G. I'll go, and then we'll kick it to Big Dude, let him have the floor for his boys. Going into this draft, what do you think the Eagles really need to do to stabilize that offense? I know they have a new OC, and we'll see how he works and fits into the weapons that he already has there, the weapons that he'll inherit. And what do they need to do on defense to get back to being one of the top defenses in the league? What's your approach in terms of the Eagles?
Yeah, I'm thinking if I'm the Eagles, I am going offensive line first. Really trying to shore up the inside, because like on defense, I'm looking at they were eighth against the pass defense, which means for me is that at least the edges are actually able to get there. But like you say, that's going to depend on who they can re-sign. But I would start definitely with offensive line. Then I'd go to the edge if I were them. I thought about tight end until what you just said. And so they may actually be able to hold off to the later rounds, but they definitely want to get that tight end. Now, this is one I kind of go back and forth on. Looking at the secondary and listening to what you just said about the rookie contracts, and then them not having that much money, it is conceivable that they may say, well, we may not be able to keep some of those in the secondary, and we need to go ahead and backfill that now while we have an opportunity. And so I can easily see that they actually, with their first pick, go cornerback. I could see that. And then they probably turn back around and go offensive line and edge. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as I look at it. Now, if I look at it just based on 23rd in passing offense, 18th in rushing, if I just kind of look at it that way, then I would kind of go down feeling where I'm the worst. But I think the way this is going to set up, particularly with their rookie contracts, they may have to do some hedging, if that makes any sense, and go ahead and backfill that. And, cornerback particularly is a really important role. So I wouldn't be surprised if they backfill that first.
Yeah, I think I agree with every single thing that you said, and I looked at it through the same exact lens. I actually also had thought about should they take a tight end, but it looks like they're really leaning towards signing DG back. The one thing about the Eagles, they do have 8 picks in this draft, and they have picks in the first few, basically every round through the 5th round, I believe. So, Howie has plenty of opportunity to work his magic. Some of those picks they picked up in trades with other teams, of course, but I think I'm pretty much in alignment with you, G. Definitely the offensive line needs to be their focus. My only concern for them in selecting an offensive lineman with this first pick is the caliber of lineman that they will get, because when you look at Francis Magua, and I hope I'm saying his name right, from Miami, and Spencer Fano from Utah, they might be gone by the time the Eagles get the pick, which leaves you with Caden Proctor, which isn't a bad pick. That's a great pick, but he may be gone. And then when there's a significant drop off, at least according to the rankings, between Proctor and Caleb Lemieux from Utah. I don't know if the Eagles will want to reach that low if one of those top 3 O linemen aren't available. And then I go right back where you are, G, with the cornerback possibly, because they're probably not going to be able to keep that crew together. You would have to think that they're probably going to prioritize Kenyon Mitchell. After that, I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. You would think that they would keep both their guys. You would think that they would keep why am I blanking on the other rookies? What's your other guy, big dude on the other side?
Cooper DeJean.
Cooper DeJean. Yeah, my boy DeJean.
Yep.
I'm guessing they would keep those two. I mean, you're not going to typically find teams that have two lockdown corners. So it'll be interesting there. Certainly doesn't hurt to have some depth at that position, especially if you can find a DB that can play cornerback and safety. Then that gives the defense a little bit of flexibility. I agree with you in terms of Nixon, the tight end. I don't think I would even look at the tight end with this pick. You either sign DG or get one later on. And you can even get one in free agency. Forget about that. You have Isaiah Likely, who's available. Kyle Pitts is available. So you can probably take a chance on trying to work through free agency or wait in the draft. Edge rusher, I think it's the same thing I said about the offensive lineman. If you can't get the edge rusher that's going to give you the value at that pick, I don't think you're going to want to go there. And I think when you're looking at the edge rushers, we're talking about Bain will be gone, Bailey will be gone, Cassius Howell will be gone. TJ Parker from Clemson might be there. He's 19th ranked prospect. After that, you're looking at the 41st ranked prospect, and I don't like any of the guys after that, other than Zion Young from Missouri, who I think is ranked way too low. They have him as the 56th ranked prospect, and he is an absolute beast to me. I think he's going to jump up. Somebody's going to reach and probably take him. I could see him going late in the first round, but definitely early second round. I do not see him dropping down to the end of a second round pick and maybe going to a third day pick or second day pick, excuse me. I just don't see that. But I'm in total agreement with you, G. I think they should focus on O-line if they can get one. And the other thing I was thinking about before we went on, possibly trading up, because they really need that O-line bad. And I think a trade up with somebody might get them to the position they need to be in, because they would probably need to move up to, even if they moved up 3 spots, that would probably secure them Caden Proctor. I don't know if you can move up enough to get Magua or Fino. I don't know if you can get up that high, but it is Howie, and you know Howie makes things happen. So, and the Eagles have all those picks too. And the Eagles have all those picks. They could give some of those picks up as well.
Because I think Philly is really in we need to win now mode. I would, and Big Dude can probably speak to this more than I can. I would be looking at some of the proven offensive linemen in free agency. I don't think I would even I don't think I would want to use the draft for that, because if we can get somebody that is proven, that right there, you don't have to deal with learning curves and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's what I wouldn't be surprised. That's what Philly's really at the top. They're looking at the free agent market for offensive line. Edge is a little different, because honestly, if you just look at the edges that are into the draft, they actually got a lot of good edges coming out of college. So you can actually, I could see them trying to move up for that. Or honestly, if I was Philly, now the more I talk this through, if I did move up, it's to go get Caleb Downs.
That's a hell of a jump to get Caleb, but not out of the realm of possibility.
You don't have that much money. You got 8 picks, I think. Yeah, 8 picks. You don't have much money. Just say forget it. We're gonna fill our biggest needs in free agency, and we're gonna go get Caleb.
And the other thing with that too, I love that. the Eagles don't. They have their needs there. They don't need a lot. I mean, they're a really great. They're not that far off from the team that won the Super Bowl. I think
Right.
the offensive coordinator. I think you'll see a huge difference in that team this year. I'm not a Nick Sirianni fan. I just think it's too much frat boy for me. But I think that even the year that they won the Super Bowl, they won despite him. You know. But man, you really got me thinking now. Now the other thing that the Eagles could do is, and we're just trying to get all our stuff out there, Stephen, but we give you the floor. We want you to take it, big dude. This Emmanuel McNeil Warren kid, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, from Toledo, same place Kenyon Mitchell's from. This dude, man, at safety, whoever gets him, I'm telling you, he's going to be an all-pro. He's going to be just like Q is at corner. He'll be that impact player at a safety. And I think that's going to be a sleeper in this pick. Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo, 6'2", 202, safety. And he can cover. He brings it. And when he brings it, when he comes up, it's violent. It's not, oh, I'm going to wrap you around the legs and bring you down. Like, you feel him when he comes. So, you know, that attacking style safety, you don't see that a lot anymore. You know, we've seen a lot of that, you know, being older and seeing those throwback safeties that, you know, not used to knock you out when the rules were different. He brings that type of physicality to the game. So that wouldn't be a bad move for Howie to trade out of the first round if you don't see somebody, like if he can't do what you said, G, like really jump up and get one of those top guys, he might want to consider trading out of this round and making sure that you can get this kid, because that'll fill one of your needs at safety. That makes your defense stronger. Going back to what G said, get you a veteran offensive lineman. You can even bring Becton back perhaps since he's free. Tight end, you don't need to worry about. DG will get signed. You're already good at cornerback on both sides. And then you're just left filling an edge need, which you might also be able to get in free agency. So hire me as the new GM for the Eagles. I get you back to the Super Bowl, man.
Okay, I'm done on Philly, so I want to hear from the expert.
Big dude, the floor is yours, my brother. Bring the Eagles another Super Bowl with these picks.
Oh, wow. Well, I tell you what, before we even do the pick, you know, that is a free agency, I just want to say, because a lot of it's going to have to do with it. Look, people got to stop falling for this stuff with A.J. Brown. I know what's happening. I know why to trade him. I know why you should trade him, but everybody knows why you're going to keep him. I mean, because not only is he still one of the top 10 wideouts, people would say he's not, but I don't know how. Not even his worst year, last year was 1,003 yards. It's going to cost them simply too much to trade A.J. Brown. You know, they go ahead and they trade him a $49.5 million cap hit, man. Why? And they can't do it before June 1st. So you don't have time to think about that. You got defensive players you got to pay, and you Guru, you and G both brought up Jalen Phillips. If you want a shot at trying to get him, you're going to have to hold on to as much money as possible. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's enough money. I really don't think that there's enough for Jalen Phillips. So with this, even if you don't trade him and he ends up leaving somewhere else, it's still you still take the cap hit almost for 2 years in a row. You know, so that is going to dictate a lot. And looking at the Eagles, the offensive line, you know, is my biggest thing, and I think we talked about that offline. The biggest issue is I think we are facing two retirements this year for sure, and possibly a third one next year, because you have, of course, left guard Landon Dickerson, who's been all pro and all everything, and can also play center if you had to. Then you got, of course, Lane Johnson, who with the Liz Frank surgery that he had on last year never was the same. 35 years old, going to be 36, I think, when the season starts. And Fred Johnson, who did the best that he could. That's about all that you had. So somehow they have to plan to replace Lane Johnson. I'm sure they didn't plan to replace him with Fred Johnson. Fred's a stopgap. So I agree with you, G. It's going to be very difficult. And if you get a proven – see, the problem with paying a proven offensive lineman in the league is, again, you got to pay him. So if you're going to trade – this whole thing about trading A.J. Brown, G, it dictates what it is that you said. It dictates whether we can find that proven lineman. All of a sudden, linemen and the proven ones, they're not that cheap. You know, you got to be able to pay them. There's too many things, and we got players on their fifth year this year also. I think Jordan Davis is on his fifth year, and Jalen Carter. So there's all these other things on there if we don't trade these people. So I would say, looking on the offensive line, I like your guy from Bama, Walt, Caden Proctor. It was a close one. I had between him and Vega Ione, you know, who is outstanding. But like you said, I'm not sure if Vega Ione from Penn State will be there. You know, that's what they call him, Vega. I can't say his full name. But, you know, I think Proctor 6'7", 366, needs to lose some weight. You know, he shouldn't be playing offensive tackle in that league against those people that big. But the man is not even 21 years old yet. I mean, to me, that's the one that you're going to get. And I guess it's us up to the Eagles and Caden to find out, is he the baddest dude on the planet at tackle? It doesn't really matter if he was a left tackle in college. I don't think it really matters. Or you take over Jordan Mailata and move him to the right side. But I think Proctor is a long-term pick, whether Lane Johnson comes back or not. He's the first one. Then you have also, and this is what name that a lot of people have forgotten about. And I know I just want to make sure that Guru and you, G, know that I'm not being biased. I just say everybody forgot about him. I think a lot of people forgot about denied Dennis Sutton from Penn State, who wasn't even supposed to come back. Number 33 wasn't supposed to come back. Not a great year, of course, for the team. Made it through the year, played in the bowl game he wasn't supposed to play in. 8.5 sacks, 12 tackles for losses. Somebody that's committed, can pass rush, got that bend and all that other stuff that people are talking about, and can stop the run, and is a very long player. I think bringing him in at the edge is going to force the Eagles to figure out what they're going to do with some of those people who are in their fifth-year deals, or people that they're going to decide to take the fifth-year option in. You have to have that other player that's going to dictate that. And then another guy, and I would say DB, you know, G, you brought up DB. I think, we can add, and maybe it's a little early for him, but I want to make it early because one thing I like about Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, you know, they are, Quinyon's got good size, but somebody like Cooper and those guys, they play like they're the baddest dudes on the planet. And I'm glad they do, because that's what we need. And what I like is somebody that's not as Harold, I would say, as a prospect, but had one of the, I'd say, the best college year last year as a corner, at least I say so, is D'Angelo Pons from Indiana, you know. And all the information that I have in some of the different buzzes and other things, at times they've clocked him at a 4.35. Now, he's short, you know, he's 5'9", he's 170, but the guy plays like a monster. You know, he plays like he's 6'2", 205, you know. And then you got Keontae Scott from the Canes, Miami, 6 foot 192, that ironically both played in the national championship. They also need to take a chance on some youth or offensive line. This is where I say to also look at who is going to be reliable. Like Cam Jurgens, he wasn't anybody that was tearing up anybody's draft board, and he's starting with the Eagles, you know. And, of course, he was behind Jason Kelsey. But the two people I want to mention, the starting center for Indiana that everybody has way back on the draft board and the prospect board, Pat Coogan, number 78. You guys might remember him. You know, can probably play center or guard. That's the way it's got to happen this year, because the injuries and this new offense that Sean Mannion is bringing in, we got to have the people that are durable and that are flexible in this offense. And then there's Logan Jones from Iowa, who's a center. I would take Coogan over them. Now, Walt, you also have a tight end from Bama, Jose Cuevas, that a lot of people are not talking about as well, who I think late round tight end will be a good tight end for people to pick him and Daquan Wright from Ole Miss. This is where we get back to the SEC, because we need athletic tight ends. We need them younger. We don't know, again, whether Dallas Goedert is going to be signed. Now, here's what I think. I think Dallas Goedert is going to be signed, and they need to sign him for 2 years. He's not going to get the hometown discount. He's not going to give it, I should say, that he gave the Eagles last year. But right now, the Eagles only have one tight end, just one. They got one tight end under contract. God, I can't even remember. They said the guy's name. I don't even know who he is. I know Cal Cataro, number 81, the tight end from there. They're not going to re-sign him, and he's barely a tight end. They need a good, strong tight end. Give him a good rookie deal. Find out who you got late. I think this is a better tight end draft than what I thought. And then also we need a third wideout because we don't know if we're going to get if we're going to have the wideout that we had last year. And Jahan Dotson. That's right. I don't know if he's going to get signed. I don't know what he wants, but I like the guy from Georgia, Zachariah Branch, and USC's wideout. I don't know if he's going to be there. He'll probably be gone, but it all depends on what kind of run that we're on. Jacoby Lane, who's a third one. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but Lane is 6'4", about 210. We need it. If we're going to go with a third wideout, we're going to need some other big guys that are almost like A.J. Brown, or even maybe at least his height. I think that's what you're looking at, because now we got to figure out on the other side, what are we going to do with Devontae Smith? What are we going to do with Smitty? He's a number 2 receiver. So if we lose A.J. Brown, is Devontae Smith, is he a number 1 receiver, or is he doing that well because of A.J.? I guess it remains to be seen. So we need to have other wideouts who aren't necessarily the number 1 picks, but are able to give us some of those other things that we need. So looking over on defense, like I said, we could look at safety, because I'm not so sure that Reed Blankenship is going to get signed. And I happen to believe that we need Reed Blankenship, who played well. Makumba, he was in and out and he got hurt. He's an undersized safety. So I'm not so sure what's going to happen with Reed Blankenship. I know that that he'll be back, and I think he's somebody that would get himself a pretty solid deal. But I think Blankenship is going to make a difference because he understands exactly what Vic Fangio wants on defense. So looking at all these different things that are happening, everything is tied together so much with this free agency. And some of the other people that we've had last year, these other backup linemen that we had, people like Brett Toth, who is solid at best, but he ends up getting a concussion, and he's 29, 30 years old. He's played his best football. So we have to go to the young part. We can get somebody that's proven, but with everything happening and what's happening with AJ, what could happen with AJ? What could happen with Dallas Goedert? What could happen with Jalen Phillips? Is everyone going to get paid? We got a lot of people playing for contracts. On the offensive line, not so much. That's why I think that Howie, if he's going to really work his magic, as you mentioned, he's got to work his magic and get that proven guy for a contract. I really think looking at all these picks, I'm glad the Eagles got 8 picks. Now, looking at this draft, I believe Howie gives up a few to move up. Other people who weren't supposed to get picks, and we'll talk about the next team next. I mean, he probably won't do anything in there, but a team that doesn't have a whole lot of picks or is out of rounds could always use somebody. So I think this is an opportunity to use those compensatory picks, and some of them later, that maybe he needs them, but you're just adding on to it. So if you're going to add on to it, you may as well give them the picks so you can go ahead and move up, especially in the late first round to the early second round. I don't know if you can move up a whole lot in the first round to get who you want to get. And I love the tight end, Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon. I just don't think it's a good time for him. And do we need him? Sure, we need him. But with this good offense, we need to keep most of the people that we have and sprinkle in some other folks that are going to be new. But that offensive line, you're facing 2 retirements and possibly a third because Cam Jurgens is all banged up also. And Landon Dickerson has only played for 5 years and has had 3 surgeries already. So we've got to go ahead and do something, get these other linemen that are durable, and maybe you can't do first round, but you try. Caden Proctor, I think, though, you need to do him if he's available.
Can we talk about the tight end and wide receiver situation real quickly before we move on to Washington? You brought up something about Devontae Smith, who's kind of been the forgotten person in the discussions of the Eagles. He had somewhat of a quiet year with all the drama that was happening with the offense. But you bring up a good point. If you do not re-sign A.J. Brown, is DS your guy? You know how I feel about him, obviously being a Bama guy, but his last couple of years, he's taken a lot of punishment for his size, and he's been banged up a little bit more almost on every play where there's contact. It seems like he comes up a little gimpy more times than not. So I think the league is starting to take its toll on him in terms of his size. So that's an interesting predicament that the Eagles could find themselves in if they don't re-sign A.J. Brown. Now, you can certainly get a wide receiver in free agency, but you're not going to find one the caliber of A.J. Brown. And you mentioned a financial hit that the Eagles would take, which they cannot afford to take, already being so cap strained at this juncture. The tight end situation, I'm not – Dallas Goedert's a good tight end. I've never been a big fan of his. He doesn't excite me. But he's done a great job for you all. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's had some games where he took over and saved you guys. But I feel like with the way your cap situation is, get a young kid on a rookie contract. I mean, with the weapons that the Eagles have, you don't need the tight end to be an all-pro. You need a tight end that can block good enough to be a part of your run game and, block downfield for the other receivers. And, the tight end that's athletic enough to win his matchups when you need him to win a matchup on a 3rd and 4 or something like that. You don't need a world-beating tight end. And if we look at the NFL today, how many world-beating tight ends are there? You know what I'm saying? I mean, somebody tell me, well, you guys will know because you brought him up as a possible MVP, but most people aren't going to know Seattle's tight end.
Yeah.
Right? But they just won the Super Bowl. Who's the Rams tight end off the top of your head? Who's New England's? Who's Denver's? Nobody knows their tight ends. Those were the Final 4 teams. So I don't know about investing in a veteran when you need to free up some money. So that's just my thoughts. I just wanted to make those thoughts on that. G, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Steph, you mentioned, and I didn't even think about it, and it's staring me in my face. I was looking at 4 teams who don't have first-round picks. And particularly, I was looking at Atlanta and Indianapolis. I think what do you think about those 2 as possible trade partners with Philly?
Atlanta and Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay and Jacksonville are also there, but I was really thinking Atlanta and Indianapolis.
I think it could work, and that's what I'm saying. We have some draft picks. We only have – the question is, though, which ones do they want to give up and which one is Howie really willing to unload? I mean, and you get those, and I don't know a whole lot about them. I'm still learning about compensatory picks, but I guess if you don't sign your big people, you get some credit for not doing that. That's the reason why A.J. Brown is It's like 66, 60-40, maybe 55-45 on whether he's going to stay, because if he signs him, then there's less of a chance of him getting a compensatory pick for not doing that. I like the fact that a trade to move up to get something immediate, especially if we don't think that Lane Johnson comes back. And now they have, what is it called? The period that starts on March 9th, the tinkering period, where you can tinker with some things. I think a lot of that is going to determine whether it's like you go ahead and move up. So if we don't hear anything from Lane Johnson, I would say keep it the same. If Lane Johnson retires, I think we're back to what you said about moving up and getting the best right tackle or the best tackle that we can use that can be a right tackle if during that time period, if he does not come back. And I would say try to see what the value is with a couple of draft picks, what they give you, and maybe you give them some draft picks in return. You take a look at whether you really need pick number 68. I wouldn't give anything at 54, but 68, maybe 98, maybe 121. But I think it depends on whether Lane Johnson, and then you may get hit twice. If Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson don't come back, then you really need to go to work, and we're going to get a proven person plus somebody big in the draft. That's where I think if you could get a Vega Ione, who's a beast, plays left guard, and all those other types of things, that's it. And let me just say this, if I may too, Guru, I agree with you on the tight end part if we have to. My thing is, I don't know that we have to pay. I don't know if we have to pay Dallas Goedert that much, because even if Dallas Goedert goes to another team, he'll get another contract. But even at 31 years old, he can still play. He might have, and that's what was interesting about him signing with the Eagles last year, because he was trying to run it back and win a Super Bowl. I'm not so sure that he would get the contract, that second contract he always dreamed about. So I would say if it comes down to he wants too much, he's gone, But if he says 2 years, $22 million, that's not too bad. I might think about that. Maybe that could work. Because if we're going to bring somebody in as a tight end, like I said, the Eagles only have one person. He's the only tight end under any type of contract. So when we start over with the offense, and I guess that'll be the question. So they're not going to, like you said, there's all kind of tight ends that you can select. But do we want somebody that's a glorified offensive lineman? Because that's what it sounds like, that the way people look at DC, that DG, they look at him as a person that is, 11 touchdowns last year, catches, and also 2 running on that little shovel pass thing. So when you look at it, he got a couple through the shovel pass, which is people who are looking at. But the guy can block his tail off. He really has become a prolific blocker, especially when he's with Lane. Now, the question is going to be, whoever comes in, is it going to be worth it? We just get rid of really the right side of the line, or at least the right tackle and the left guard. If we lose those people, then it's beyond the offense. We got to get people that could hold it down and keep us in the race.
I was just looking at Philly's needs and their position at 23. Other than tight end, it is conceivable that y'all could be at least beyond 5 at edge, cornerback, O-line, and safety. In terms of position rankings at each one of those. So looking at that, one, would tight end actually make sense for the draft? Because if I'm looking at needs, I want to see that I think you may be on the 3rd or 4th in the depth at the tight end. I have to go back and calculate it, but I think it was 4th. Or do you trade knowing that some you can find some gems in second, third, or later rounds? I'm just wondering, based on your needs and looking at the depth chart compared to some of these others, where you could possibly be.
Yeah, I was just, and I guess that's the question all around. I mean, at corner, we need somebody. Adoree Jackson has got to go. He is just not there. There's a situation. Can he still play football? Yes. Can he play at the level that he played against? No, he can't. Even Keely Ringo, he's not happening like he really needs to. So we need to bring somebody in, like I said, at corner that's proven, and then the edge, like I said, everybody's playing for a contract, and that's why I say, would deny Dennis Sutton, and that's why I look at the second pick. A lot of people would say that he's behind a lot of D linemen, but I think that on a whole lot of different things. In fact, he was higher rated probably before Penn State had the year that it had last year, and all those things and disappointment. And, when your team is playing bad and you lose to an 0-4 UCLA team, everybody on the team is awful. That's the way everybody looks at it. And you mentioned scouts and all those things a lot too, G. I'm sure people are looking at that, whether he's responding to a challenge, not even did he make a mistake. And hopefully, looking at the offensive line, I know, Guru, you brought up Mekhi Becton, which was an excellent thing to bring up. I think we didn't mention it on the show, but I thought that was one of the biggest mistakes that the Eagles made last year was letting him walk to the Chargers for 2 years at $20 million. Why did you let – that was the best – he came from the Jets. It was probably the best investment that you could have had, and and he never played guard until last year, and they win the Super Bowl. He never played guard. And Mekhi looked at it like he's not going to get a better contract. But then when he went to the Chargers, they weren't going to offer him a whole lot more. He got the contract, but, you don't get the full guarantee. So it's hard to go back to other people. I think for sure the Eagles have got to figure out how they want to reconstruct that line and that offensive line and stick to it. The defensive line, we have some choices. Our linebackers are set, I would say, on defense, and people may disagree with this. One of my favorite players in the last 10 years, I would say, Nakobe Dean. I don't think we can do it. I think Jahad Campbell and all our other linebackers, I think we're good there now. I don't think we can afford to sign Nakobe Dean. Do we need him? Sure. But I'm not so sure that he's not the man out because of what else you have to do holistically with the defense. And then that affects anybody else you can sign. So these free agent signings, there's just so much tied up in different places. And, I'm so sick of – I like Howie Roseman, but him and Sirianni together, I don't like them. I don't think they're so good together when they get in front of the media. Because they say one thing, but you can hear a total another thing. I mean, from what they said, they hate to lose good players. To me, what that means is, you're going to lose good players. So, and that's true. And I understand that. But what's the alternative to not keeping A.J. Brown? Or what offensive lineman, do you move? Do you move Cam Jurgens? They go even younger, They don't want to talk about even the more difficult conversations. And everybody on defense, they just can't have the money. They cannot. And I think that's why Nakobe Dean has to go. And I was trying to think of somebody else. But pretty much that's it. We have our other safety. His brother is the running back. I forgot our safety's name. That's a shame. He didn't quite work out, number 21. But, I think for the Eagles, they've got to make the big splash is that first pick. I don't think getting Kenyon Sadiq is where we ought to go first. And it says that we need a tight end. Well, do we? Do we need that tight end? I'd love to have him. Because he plays in the slot also. But again, with this new offense, what does that mean? Because if the offense isn't going well and we can't get a consistent game out of the offense, and I think that's what A.J. Brown was saying. A.J. Brown, don't get me wrong, he still needs to grow up the way he handles stuff. He really does. And I respect the guy. I really
Washington may be ahead of you.
What did you mean? I'm sorry. What did you mean by that?
Washington, I know we're going to get to this, but Washington needs a tight end. So I mean, there's several people have that. So by the time Washington gets up, the top tight ends may be gone.
Well, and that's a great point, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want to put all of I don't want to put all the chips in one place, but I think with offensive linemen, a lot of them could be gone, but still the ones who are the top 15 people that you look at, they're still probably pretty solid. I mean, no one said. I never thought when I heard about Cam Jurgens, I heard he was pretty good. I think I remember him at Nebraska being solid Big Ten player. I did not see him being the person that was going to be the center on a Super Bowl team. And, of course, we don't have Stoutland University anymore. So whoever this new the offensive line coach is and run game coordinator, I believe, for Cooper, that's his name, with K-U-P-E-R, it's going to be interesting to see how he brings this first group along. Somebody has got to sell Cooper to other people who want to play there. So that's the thing, G. If they want to get a proven offensive lineman from them somewhere, Cooper has got to be sold to other people who want to play for him, because offensive line, people don't believe it. They're divas also. You probably don't hear as much from them in the media, but trying to coach them, there's so many things that have to be done a certain way, but people just wouldn't know it because it doesn't involve catching the ball or scoring a touchdown. But you'd be surprised about what position. You can't put me on the left side because you can't put me on the right. You can't run to this side that play because I don't do that well. Wait a minute, hold on. So somehow there's a whole lot that if the Eagles are not going to go by this pick and they're going to trade pick, they get people, this new offensive coordinator and the new offensive line coach, people, somehow they've got to sell that.
Okay, but let's transition to Washington. I think there's definitely a tie here to the Eagles as we get into the discussion of Washington. Something came to mind that I thought of, but I'll save that for my part on here. Commanders, obviously a very disappointing season after being in the NFC Championship game in 2024. They think that they loaded their roster, but the roster did not live up to expectations. And really all of it started with Terry McLaurin's discontentment in the offseason, coming to camp late. And that was really an omen for what was to come for the Commanders during the rest of the year. Their season, really, if you define it in one word, injuries. Jaden Daniels was injury prone throughout the season. Week 2, he had a knee sprain. Week 7, he had a hamstring. Week 9, he dislocated his elbow. Week 14, he aggravated the elbow when he shouldn't even probably been in the game at that point because their season was done. And that was a concern going into the draft, was his durability. So that's something that they'll need to keep an eye on. And then there was a plethora of other key players that got hurt that they lost for the season. You had first Austin Eckler in week 2 tore his Achilles. Luke McCaffrey in week 8 broke his collarbone. Marshawn Lattimore, their Pro Bowl cornerback, in week 9 tore his ACL. And then Zach Ertz in week 14 tore his ACL. So the Commanders had some players on that team, but some of their stars, those were star players that were hurt. That wasn't, journeymen or backups. Those were some of their key pieces that ended up being hurt. And that had a big part to do with what a disappointing season they had. They were last in total defense, 27th in interceptions, last in fumble recoveries. They only had 2 fumbles recovered all year. How does an NFL team have 2 fumbles recovered during an entire season? That's ridiculous. They allowed the 27th most points But ironically, they were 13th in sacks. So somehow they were kind of getting to the quarterback. But I guess maybe could look back at the schedule and see who did they get those sacks against, probably would be the question there. On offense, it wasn't much better. Actually, way worse. 24th in passing yards, 28th in passing touchdowns. But they were 4th in rushing yards, which was a shocker to me that they ran the ball so well and their passing offense was so weak. They were 8th in rushing touchdowns, but they were 29th in third down conversions, which, third downs, that can define games. If you can't convert those into first downs, you're not going to win a lot of games. And more importantly, they were minus 13 in turnover margin. You cannot lose the turnover battle. They had plenty of key additions during the season. Sorry, I'm late on that for all the people watching us on YouTube. They had some key additions to their team. Laramie Tunsil, Deebo Samuel Jr., who I thought had a little bit of a disappointing season. Kinlaw, Goldman, Von Miller, who somehow keeps getting contracts, and Jonathan Jones at cornerback. And they lost long-term lineman, defensive tackle Jonathan Allen to the Vikings, who had a pretty good year with the Vikings. In the offseason, I think in addition to Daniels remaining healthy, Washington really needs to look at that passing game. I just gave you the numbers on there and that defense. But I think they need to crush free agency because they have a lot of cap space. They have $68 million in cap space. They're ranked towards the top in cap space. So I think they could do some serious damage in free agency, which might work for them since they don't have a bunch of draft picks. Big dude, what are you thinking in terms of what the Commanders should be looking at? They look towards this draft.
Well, it sounds like from all the stuff that you were saying, that they need to get to the quarterback. I mean, and they need to have some athletic players on defense. And I think you had up there the edge. Obviously, they're 7th, so it's going to be very difficult to see. I'm pretty sure that Bain or Reese isn't going to be around. They may have a shot at David Bailey from Texas Tech. I think David Bailey, almost kind of like Chase Young, would give them that type of energy. So I think that they ought to look at that. And they also need to figure out, because I can't remember what kind of contract Terry McLaurin has, but they need somebody like Cornell Tate from Ohio State to pair with McLaurin. And then, of course, they're also, let's see, they're also going to need a line, but they're also going to need to change their offensive line because Laramie Tunsil, we don't know what his health is going to be. So they're going to have to look at that and then have someone else ready. And then, of course, their middle linebacker, since their other linebackers probably out or almost finished, they need somebody to be the quarterback for the defense.
And what about you on the Commanders, G?
Yeah, what stood out to me was salary cap because they have that $68 million. So they have some serious options. And if you go and look at the way they pay people, they really spread it out. You remember how we talked about New York, how they spread the wealth? Washington did a good job with that. Now Debo's contract is an outlier. So we'll see what that means in the future. But nevertheless, that $68 million gives them options, particularly in free agency. So they need to shore up their quality players, shore those, and then they need to go out and get some. So who would I focus on if I was Washington? I think in free agency, that's where I would probably go get my wide receiver. And probably try to get my edge since I have that money, and then I would probably use the draft to go out and get the tight end, the linebacker, go get a cornerback. So, but I would really, really try to get that skill players, in free agency if I can. So that's pretty much how I think Washington should approach it. Because here's the thing. I do believe a big part of Washington's pass game was an injury story, more so than a quality of play story. So then you can make an argument that they can use free agency or even use the draft for the backup, because the next man up, you can argue that they didn't do as well as you would hope they would have done. So you can make that argument to use the draft, for that purpose. But definitely with 68 million, when March 11 hits, when free agency opens up, they are going to be on a buying spree, I think. But I think they're going to be smart about it. Because again, if you look at how they spread out their contracts, other than Devo, it's really not a lot of outside money per position. And they are also they're right there if they fix that. And then the defense is probably where they're going to really focus in the draft, would be my guess. Edge is probably the most important thing for them, because if you can put pressure on the quarterback, you can be that can become an extra DB. You're making them force the ball down. That actually helps your defensive backs. And so you really need that. I think their middle was pretty good on the defensive line. Was it? No. They need to get some. They need to get some tackles as well. So they got a lot to do on that defensive line. A lot. I know they
Yeah.
say the need is linebacker, quarter edge, and I'm like, yo, no. Looking at this, they need up front first. Then I would go to the second level and then the DBs. I would do edge and defensive tackle first on defense.
Yeah, so I originally had them going edge, and I think Big Dude, you said it as well, to get David Bailey from Texas Tech. But after our Eagles discussion, and G, you opened up this can of worms. Actually, you said it too, Big Dude. I think that they need a lot, but I think they have the money in free agency. I think they should trade with the Eagles. I think they should trade that pick with the Eagles, move down to 23, and see if they can get it, because they don't have a second round pick, I don't believe. See if maybe the Eagles are willing to throw in that second round pick. And then that way the Eagles get the stud that they want, because they'll be the seventh pick. They'll pretty much, they can get whatever they want at 7. And Washington will create additional capital for themselves, with giving them a second round pick. And now they got 2 picks. They get that pick, right? Or sorry, get their 23rd pick and still have all that money to work with. And I think you're going to get a good player for what their needs are at 23. There was nobody that I loved for them at 7. I just plugged somebody in because they had the 7th pick, and I looked at what their need was. But I wasn't like, oh, the Commanders got to keep that pick and get David Bailey. I didn't feel that way about it. That's what I would do if I was Washington, because like you said, G, they're going to go off March 11th. We might wake up to Washington sign 5 people on March 11th. So that's my simple thoughts on Washington. And it's a little risky. It's hard because at 7, what you could get versus what you could get at 23, but they're in a great position with all that cap space. And I just think Big Dude, you mentioned it even when you talked about, actually both of you mentioned it, you talk about getting a veteran versus getting a rookie. And again, this is a team that was in NFC Championship 2 seasons ago. While it looks like you're really far off, you might not be that far off if you make the right offseason moves to at least get yourself back to being competitive in the division. And then, once you compete for your division, all bets off after that if you could get the division. So that's my thoughts on the Commanders. And I'm going to leave that there for y'all to marinate. Let it marinate a little bit. What do you guys think about them giving that pickup?
I like the trade. And that's what I was saying. When I think about Howie, he's not getting draft picks to ever that I know of. I don't recall him anytime soon, in the recent history, using all those draft picks. They're always doing it to wheel and deal. So I think doing it with somebody in the division, I think it makes sense as long as everybody's getting what they want.
And maybe that's the rough thing, right? Do you do that within your division? I mean, I'm thinking of putting my team in there. Am I letting the Patriots move up to 7?
Well, see, I think it's a wonderful idea if you just step back and you're playing, draft Monopoly. That is a wonderful idea. But yeah, nah, not within my league. No. They should do it, just not with Philly.
That's a great way to put it, G. Draft Monopoly. I'm not the GM for Washington, so of course I can play those games.
No. Not doing it with Philly, not doing it with Dallas. And who else am I missing?
The Giants.
Yes. Anybody else? Or heck, maybe somebody in the AFC.
But that does open the door, though, for, I mean, I hate to go back to the Eagles, but it does open the door now. So, okay, so say your division rival isn't going to let you do it. You can probably get somebody else to do that. And I like what G mentioned about the 4 teams that don't have a pick. Where do they fall within this? Maybe they have some players that you guys could take advantage of, big dude, a veteran that maybe they're willing to give up for a pick. I mean, you got no picks in the first round. What were the teams again, G? Atlanta, Indy, Green Bay, and Jacksonville.
Green Bay and Jacksonville.
So think about if you're Jacksonville, you didn't do the damage that you were expected to do in the playoffs, but you have a team that should come back and win your division next year, but you don't have any first-round picks, and maybe your first-round pick can put you over the top.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
the thing about Indianapolis, you got this potential all-world quarterback, but you got a Swiss cheese line.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as to put Daniel Jones in a sentence with all-world quarterback.
Okay,
I know you said potential.
That was a bit of hyperbole. He's got good potential, but he got a line that's crap.
He looked good though. He did. You're right though. He looked good. And if he can get some protection, I mean, he showed us what he could do. I mean, don't forget he took the Giants to the playoffs, and I forgot they upset Minnesota, I believe it was. So, he can play. He can definitely play.
Yeah,
big dude, hop in.
Yeah, I think even with Green Bay, Green Bay it always appears to be. And they're not that far away either. They appear to be always 1 or 2 players away, and they're not afraid to make the trade, as you saw, for them getting Micah. So, and I think when you get somebody like Micah, you might be able to get someone through free agency that wants to be on defense and wants to play. He's one of those guys that a lot of people want to play with. So I think that might not be a bad idea there. Atlanta, it's really hard to tell. Again, you got to sell. You don't have to sell Atlanta to the people, as you said, Guru. We were watching some of the episodes, and you were saying just how dedicated the Atlanta fans were. We get that, but who wants to go play there? I know there's reasons that people want to be there for other reasons. You like the city and the social life and all those other things, but who is there that people really want to play with? And they're. I think that they can, you can make the trade with them, but having no trade, even later, they could probably use a 4th round. They don't need anything first. They can get first round, sure. Who do they have on their team that has first round value? Their running backs are good, but do I give them first round? Maybe second. Bijan, right? Bijan Robinson. That's what I'm saying. I don't know who's the
only one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, with Atlanta, I'm picking hard, and maybe I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But they have some fine athletes. Atlanta, all those people are just tremendous. they probably all did good at the combine, and that's a whole nother subject. But when you're beyond the combine and everything goes on, how does all that translate into the year you're going to have? It's hard to tell.
So something else I'm looking at with Washington, they have Von Miller and Bobby Wagner. And both of them, Von Miller is going to be 37. Bobby Wagner is going to be 36 years old. So you got to figure they can dump that money and free up even more cap space. You're talking that looks like another 12 or 13 million if I'm looking at this properly. So that puts them up They're over 80 million in cap space with just those two. Figure they're not going to sign Hurts. There's a few other people on there. They could easily end up in the high 80s with cap space, if not 90s, by the time it's all said and done. So Washington is a very interesting team that I think people may have kind of cast aside that NFC Championship year as being a little fluky, especially in terms of how bad they were this year. But, you said it. Injuries probably really did play a key role, especially in that passing game. And who is even their other wide receiver? I mean, it's not a star name. We can't name him off the top of our head. I guess it would have been McCaffrey, right? Who was a rookie. Yeah. So he was hurt as well. But if you're talking about you're playing a team that has McCaffrey and my man that held out again, I'm blanking on names.
Let me pull up something here.
McLaurin. If you're playing them, are you feeling like, oh man, we got McCaffrey and McLaurin today? Oh, how are we going to stop them? So I don't know. Washington is a little bit of a mystery to me, and I guess we'll find out who the real Washington is this year, right? Are they that team that made it to the NFC Championship game, or is this what we saw last year is who they're going to be? Right. Even with all the injuries. Remember, I don't know if you remember I don't remember what week it was, but it was when Jaden Daniels came back from the first injury and they played the Chargers in LA and they smoked them. And I thought that maybe they were on their way, but then the season unfolded as it did. So I don't know. It's a team I can't get a fix on. But what I did want to circle back to, I want to say about the Eagles stuff. And I kind of say, a big dude, I kind of say this in jest. It's nice to have first world problems, man. Because you guys really don't need a lot.
That's why he took the draft picks. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why he got the draft picks, to get what he wants to get. That's to get exactly what he wants to get.
Philly could just say, you know what? Here's the pick. Give me some cash and some late rounds.
They could, because you only had 2.8, I think, was your cap space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need some money.
Yep.
That's why.
But you don't need a lot. But you don't need a lot of pieces, though. So
no.
I mean, honestly, before you draft, I would take your team going into the next year with the offensive coordinator change. So if you think about it from that perspective,
back to the Super Bowl is what you're saying?
I'm not saying Super Bowl, but certainly way better than they were this year. That NFC is tough. So I'm not going to throw anybody as an automatic Super Bowl, but it gets them back to Super Bowl level team. Because it was just the offense.
I honestly think that conference is going to come down to Washington and Philly.
I don't.
I think Washington is going to get it together this season. As much as I detest that team, I think they're going to show out again. I think
that division is going to be a dogfight. I think all four teams are going to be good. I think the Eagles might have another year to possibly dominate it, but after this, the Giants are going to be really good with Harbaugh. He'll get that straight, and they were competitive last year. Washington, I agree with you. They'll be there. And Dallas just got to get the defense together.
Dallas is going Dallas. I mean, they can get the defense together. They can get special teams. They can have 13 men on the field. They're going to Dallas.
It's called the Jerry Jones jinx. They'll never win again while he owns it.
He
right, so
cursed them.
any final words? So we're wrapping up the NFC East here. Any final words on any of the teams in the NFC East? I mean, it looks well. You know what? We're talking about it. We hadn't planned on it. Do we want to pick a division winner for next year?
I'd be just guessing. I'd be
messing
playing Monopoly, as you always say.
I'm messing with you guys. Certainly it's too early to go there.
I think Washington gonna use that $68 million, and they're gonna come up with a juggernaut of a team in the East.
Eagles are gonna three-peat.
Yeah, well, I would say Washington too, G, but Washington always finds a way to mess stuff up, man. I don't know how they do it. They always find a way. Like the Albert Hainsworth pick is still killing me. How did they get that, man? No defensive lineman made more than $100 million, and they messed that up.
And big dude, think about what you said is even more magnified. If you go back to that NFC Championship game, Washington was hanging.
Yeah.
And they made one mistake and fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Folded. I'm telling you, I do not like the Commanders at all, but I have to respect the technique. I think that they're getting ready to buy themselves an NFC championship.
You know how the NFC West was this year? I think that'll be the NFC East in terms. I'm going to go on record now saying 3 teams out of NFC East make the playoffs.
I can see that.
Because it seems like the Giants are far off, but they're not that far off. Oh, yeah, Eagles are definitely going. Yeah. And honestly, I don't even know who the third team might be. Because Dallas should be the third team, but I'm almost thinking the Giants will be the third team.
You know why I was thinking the Giants? I honestly think having Harbaugh is going to add a different energy.
Yep.
And as Steph, you play, a high level college football. That is an intangible.
Yep. No doubt about it. All right. So that will wrap up our NFC East draft preview. Our next episode, we are going to the NFC North, the cold cities. We'll start with Chicago and Detroit and dig into what they need to do in the draft. Remember to like and follow us on all the major platforms, wherever you consume your podcast. Until then, see you later.